Good evening, virtual and in person. Okay, so we basically have 2.5 chapters left of this sefer, and then we'll skip to 12, back to Orach Chaim stuff. I think is the consensus. So I propose we start today on page 332. If that's okay, we're just going to skip a little bit, just because I think to cover some ground, some stuff which sort of is less relevant. Be welcome to read in your own time. But I think we're going to start on page 332 today. That's okay with you. We're just finishing up with laws of Tevilah. But just those who want to read up the few pages we missed, it talks about the way that the woman stands in the mikveh and checking herself again. But we sort of covered the checking previously. The big machloket between Ashkenazim and Sfardim comes regarding the bracha, which we're going to see on page 332. When does the woman make the bracha for Tevilah? Before or after the Tevilah? And this is where we get into different minhagim. So, Chaim. So page 332. Bracha upon immersion. Okay. So the Gemara only tells us when it comes to the bracha. Okay, the Gemara. Can you hear me? Okay. Good. Okay. So the Gemara tells us the bracha only when talking about a ger who does tefillah. So this is Gemara in Pesachim. It's all 50. The Chulei Alma Miha says the Gemara there. That ideally that before a mitzvah is when we make the bracha. Minalan, how do we know? The Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Kol ha-mitzvah mavarech alehen over le'asiyatan. We usually do things prior to their performance. Bei Rav Amri, page 332. Bei Rav Amri, chutz min Tevilah. The exception is Tevilah. The akati gavra lo chazi, because we're talking about Tevilah of a ger. He's not yet chazi as a gavra. When he's not yet Jewish, he can't make the bracha. So therefore, he would have to make the bracha after he comes out of the mikveh. Itmar, Tanyinami hachi, tavo va'ala ba'aliyato omer baruch Hashem tzivanu ala Tevilah. In other words, a ger makes the bracha after the immersion. Good. And then in the spirit of brachot, brachot hatznelim.
Of course, we have another example.
Another example.
Used every Friday night.
Right.
Women.
Oh, well, that's machloket Ashkenaziyot and Sfardiot is to hadlakat nerot. That's why the whole thing about covering is that ki'ilu it's over lasiyatan. Another example is anatilat yadayim. But why both of those? But again, why are those both the exception? Because if your hands are unclean, so you shouldn't be making the bracha before you've washed. You wash them first.
But all the cases yes, like on the top of the dime, for example, yes, is there commonality?
Interesting. I mean, that's Rabbanan. Kabbat Shabbos says Takanos Nevi'im.
Basically, when it comes to Tevilah,
but Tevilah is their right. The bracha is obviously Rabbanan.
Tevilah and hand wash, you're not at the time that you have to make a bracha. You're not allowed to make a bracha. You're not ready.
So
you have to make it.
I just want to know if there's other commonalities.
It seems that they are all cases where you were unable to make the bracha prior to, and therefore you have to, by necessity, make it afterwards.
Once you made the bracha, you can't actually proceed.
Right. So there is it in the bracha rather than in the hadlaka. But whereas Sephardi women we know that are not, according to the Shulchan Aruch at least, are not makabel Shabbos by making the bracha, and therefore they can make the bracha and then light. Okay. So the question is that it's part of the cultural difference between Europe and, very good. Okay, so the question is then, well, the Gemara only spoke about a ger. So do we say lo plug, and this halacha that you always make the bracha afterwards apply even for a woman doing tefillah? Or would one say that no, that was only by a ger, but a woman who's obviously Jewish prior to the tefillah can make and should make the bracha first? So that's what the Rambam says, and the Rif, and the Chachmei Sfarad, and the Gaonim in source 51, the Rambam says, Ein lecha mitzvah shemavarchin acha asiyata le'olam, ela tfilat hager bilvad. The only time you make the bracha afterwards is tefillah of a ger. Sheni achol lomar, because he cannot yet say, I can sheg shem mistavet sivanu, because he's not yet commanded. Va'adayin lo nit kadesh, v'lo nit stava, ad sheyitzbol. In other words, specifically tefillah of a ger. Tosfot again quote the opinion of the Gaonim, who say similarly in source 52. Omer Rabbeinu Chananel b'shem ha-Gaon, dafka b'tvilat hager, the lo chazi kodem tefillah. Only a ger would make the bracha afterwards because he's not yet Jewish. The lo matzi l'meima v'tzivanu, da kati nachrihu, he's still a goy. Aval sha'ar chayavei tefillah, could go on balkeri v'cheot sebo, mutar levarich. They can make a bracha prior to the immersion. Afal pichen omeri, the ein ligor b'nashim shevarchat ala tefillah. Nonetheless, the Re says don't criticize women who make the bracha after the tefillah. Kivan da ikad tvila ger de lo matzi levarech lo chilku. Maybe it's what we call a low plug. That in all tvila they said to make the bracha afterwards. So we have this machloket between Sfaradi poskim and Ashkenazi poskim. Rashi also says that there's no low plug, and therefore all tvila the bracha should be afterwards. So in source 53 there, Rashi says that Kati Gavra lo chazi, mishamahu tvila, because of that tvila vager, tikkun b'chol hatvilot birkatam levasof. They always make the bracha afterwards. So this machloket between Ashkenazi Rishonim and Sfaradi Rishonim becomes also a machloket between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. In source 54 there, in Yordeh, Simon Reish, which deals with Hilchot Tvila, when she gets undressed, she amedet b'chaluka, while she's still wearing her robe, to varech, that's when, according to the Shulchan Aruch, she makes the bracha. Then she removes her cloak. Why? Because there's a question about making a bracha when she's undressed. And therefore, the way that the Mechaber describes it is she should have a gown on, bathrobe, make the bracha, and then take off, and then go straight into the mikveh. But if she didn't, then then she should at least go up to her neck in water. If it's clear water, she muddies the waters, because they weren't dealing with mikvahs which are tiled, but take some of the mud to cover it. The idea is to cover up her erva, so she should make a bracha in that way. Hagar, but there are sorry.
It's saying when you move the water around, it's not a clear. There's not a clear vision as such. So there's the water's moving and stuff. It's
right. That's the idea. I mean, this is less a problem for women than it is for men because of Makom Erva. But okay, Hagar. The Yeshomrim, there are those that say Shelot Tavarech ad achar tvila v'cheinu hagim. So that's what Ashkenazi or some Ashkenazi women do. That they only make the bracha after the tvila. Shel achar hatvila ba'oda amedet b'toch hamayim, while she's still in the water. Mechaset at samaba bigda or b'chaluka umevarechet. That she makes she covers herself with her, basically, while she's standing in the water as she gets up with a and then makes the bracha. So, page 333. So, machloket Ashkenazim and Sfardim as to whether they make the bracha before or after the tefillah, based on whether we make a low plug or we learn that the ger was an exception. Okay, so that's a machloket. We'll see that there is a third minhag based on the shla, which is to do multiple tevilot, which is what many women in Ashkenaz do, which is actually not like the Ramah, but rather they do a tevila, then they make a bracha, and then they do another tevila. And then they say there's some sort of implicit stipulation that if the bracha has to be before, then the first tevila is not a good tevila, and the second tevila is a good tevila. But if the bracha is supposed to be after, then right, exactly, very frum. And there are different minhagim to do 3 times, 7 times. Manyan Ma'od. Nachon, he was. Horvitz, Nachon. Interesting. Mishpacha. Are you the same mishpacha? Okay. So what happens halacha lemaisa? The other question is that there's a takana against making brachos in the beit merchat sa'ot, in a bathhouse. So there's discussions about the mikvahs today, if they're attached, or depending on the mikvah, if there's a bath in the same room as the actual mikvah, or if it's in a side room. If it's in the same room, then maybe it shouldn't be a bracha recited there. So the minhag is typically to be mekel, even if the mikvah itself is in there, even if the mikvah is heated, that's not considered merchat sa'ot, a bathhouse. And Rav Vazner here in source 55 explains that to be so. He a bit later in the next section, right? That's why I thought I mentioned it now, because that seems to be quite sort of prevalent in Ashkenaz, despite the Ramah. So source 55 there, the Shevet HaLevi says, "Ba'achronim danu." The Achronim discussed im shaykh b'zeh is amirat bracha b'beit hamerchat. In the way that the modern mikvahs are built, is a question of making a bracha in the bathhouse. Ubizmanam hamerchatz v'mikvah hayu b'shnei mekomot nifradim. There were 2 separate buildings in those days. But today, again, certain places where it's literally in the same room. Some say you should make the bracha outside before you enter the room. The mikveh there's not such a problem, and that's the consensus. Okay, so it's not basically a sauna, essentially. It's a mikveh, and therefore there's no issue of making a bracha there. But mikol makom, nonetheless, kat to achronim, to kol zeh Heter lebirkat tvila bilvat. This is only for the bracha of the tvila. Ava bishar brachot the tvilat kalim and lismoch al heter there. So don't have your snack in the mikveh. Take it outside if you need to make a bracha for other things. Ule inyan, and he takes it so far that ule inyan aniat amen al birkat tvila. So can the balanit answer amen? Niresha en la'anot. Al kolpani b'makom sheyesh ambatia. If you're in an area where there's a bathtub in the actual place, the Shevet HaLevi says not even to answer amen, which is quite a chiddush, because it's a special dispensation for the bracha over the tvila. Okay.
I mean, if you're
Yes.
making the dispensation for bracha, then there should be the dispensation for amen.
And certain, most big vault, it's like they have rooms and they're like some cubicles, and then multiple doors lead onto the mikvah room. So typically our mikvah are not literally in the same room as the bath. There's like separate rooms, and then they open the door. The prep rooms, exactly. So it's probably less shayach this particular case anyway. But nonetheless, Rav Ovadia, because again he was insistent on the minhag for Sfaradim that they make the bracha first, so then they should make the bracha in the side room, and then go straight into the mikveh, rather than make it in the actual mikveh room. So he says in 56, the Tarat Abayit, Rav Ovadia's work on Hilchot Nida, B'Dorat Harishonim, Hayu mikvaot shelehem sonanim, they had called mikvaot, Ulam B'Dorat Achronim, but in recent generations, Pashat HaMinhag B'chol HaMakomot Litzbol B'mayim Chamim. The minhag is we have mikvahs in hot water, and we said that that's the minhag in Ashkenaz, even on Leil Shabbat, as we saw last week. That the water is heated before Shabbat, and we're meikul to encourage women to go to the mikveh. And meshum kach din hamikvaot kedin beit hamerchatz. And therefore, Rabbi Ovadia is machmir and says the mikveh chamber is like a bathhouse. Va'asur liisha levarech ala tvila b'toch chadar hamikveh. And therefore, Rabbi Ovadia says the woman cannot make the bracha in the mikveh room. Ela tzricha levarech b'cheder samuch lemikveh. She's doing it in the hallway adjacent to the mikveh. But Oda Levusha b'chalukah, while she's still got a robe on. Umiyad la'achar bracha tifshot chalukah. Then straight away she goes and tovels. V'tikanes lemikveh, and goes into the mikveh. V'titbol be'en omen ve'en dvarim, and she immerses without speaking in between. Ki asur lahafsik b'dibur bein habracha lemitzvah, because you cannot interrupt. But nonetheless, you see from here that Rav Ovadia is very strict about the room that we call the mikveh room, and not to even make the bracha there. So that's what Hebrew says for Nashim Sfaradiot. They should make the bracha and the hallway, and then go straight into the mikveh. Interesting. We saw that the Ramah disagreed and said that minhag Ashkenaz was to make the bracha after the tefillah. And now we get to the question about, well, really there are different minhagim. The Shlah, who says that there's a minhag to give 2 or even 3 times when it comes to tefillah. So that's what we're going to see now. Okay. So if we look here in source 57, the Shevet HaLevi brings this extra minhag. So again, just to summarize for those who came in, we're discussing when to make the bracha. So Sfaradim, the Shulchan Aruch says they make the bracha first, then they do the tefillah. Whereas Ashkenazim, the Ramah brings, should do the tefillah and then make the bracha. Now we're going to see that there's a different minhag to do multiple tefillot and to do the bracha in between. And that's in source 57. The Shevet HaLevi brings the minhag of the Shlah. Uve'er heitev muvah mishlah hakadosh litbal shtei pa'amim, to do 2 tefillahs. Tefillah achat kodem habracha v'tevarech v'shuv titbal. So tefillah, bracha, and then another tefillah. Kedei sheyeh over la'asiyatan v'gam la'achar asiyatan. And that way the bracha is both before and after tefillah. V'chein noagim midorot rabim, and there's an established minhag that way. V'metzuvat chavot yair lamadnu de'ika shloshet ta'amim al tefillah shtei pa'amim. 3 different reasons as to why there might be a double tefillah. Aleph, o mishum habracha, because of the question of when the bracha should be. So either way, you fulfill the obligation. Or lifnei tefillah or la'achar tefillah. Bet or d'shema ira la kilkul b'tefillah rishona. There's a concern that it's basically a chumrah, lest that a hair didn't go all the way under or something in the first tefillah, so they do it again. But tovelet misafek on pam, so you do a second one. Gimel or mishum to sefet tahara u'tshuva. In other words, it's not mandated for halacha, but it's an inyan, as we say. Yesh inyan, as opposed to yesh inyan. There's an inyan to do an extra tahara, yes.
2 questions. Number
Sure.
1, where do we see you do something twice because you might not be able to the first time? Second question.
When it comes to the Shlah, that's his thing. Shlah Kadosh, it's all about.
You don't make Kiddush twice if you have the right kavanah. The second question is, the brachas have to be said when the woman's tzneus.
Then, I don't know if they brought it in the book, but so before we said that the machloket Shulchan Aruch and Ramah would be that, you know, they before getting undressed, then if you do this, so then they usually cross their arms or something, which is a heter for women, but not for men, because they don't get out in between each tevila and then put the robe back on and then get back in. So no, it's so that they talk about either being solel the mayim, they're being solel the mayim, crossing the arms. There are different directives given. In Achinam, it's not. We don't. Yeah, it's not a typical. It's not a typical thing that we see. Maybe because of the chumrah of karet here, but that is you know, as we said, la'arbevet hasatan, as I spoke about last year. When it comes to you know, the idea of mikveh representing kedusha and tahara, I mean, the real reason it seems was because of the brachot. But the Sefer Hasidim brings there are different minhagim. Many women don't do twice; they do 3 times, and there are some that do even more. So he brings to the end of his words of the Sefer Hasidim katav shetovlim 3 pa'amim. V'yesh od minhagim 25 sheva ve'eset tvilot. There are different minhagim, and usually this thing usually follows minhag imahot as opposed to minhag avot in this regard, or minhag. Right? Not really. It's true, but so yeah, that's a whole. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about once they get 613 in before Yom Kippur or something. Yes. Okay.
But the briskers just do it like this. You put your head, put yourself under the water, and then you just stick your finger in and out.
Right, exactly. That's what we said. Yeah, or one hair going in and out. The halacha clears, you know. So, but again, there are different minhagim. I said it's quite a prevalent minhag to do, but in Ashkenazi circles, to do tefillah twice or 2 or 3 dips. Rabbi Vaji says, what about if a woman wants to change her minhag? She grew up in a Hasidic family with doing, I don't know, 7 times, and then she only really wants to do 1 now, or 2, whatever it is. So Tahara Tabaita Katsar, Rabbi Vaji discusses in source 58. Isha Tavelet Achas Virat Shivan Akim. She's doing Tevila after Shivan Akim. Daila B'Tvila Achat Bilvat. Of course, according to halacha, she only really needs 1 Tvila. But often Shekol Gufa V'Sarateha Yeyu B'Toch Hamayim Shiba Mikvah. And obviously, it's got to all be in one go. But Yesh Nashim, but those women Shenagu Litvol Shtei Pe'amim or Shalosh Pamim. So some do 2 or 3 times, as we've just seen. But Yesh Shenagu Litvol Sheva, and some people do 7. The Ein Zemin Hadin is obviously not a halachic requirement. El Chumra Ba'alma Tosefet Tahara. It's an Indian, as we say, increasing Tahara, but it's not a halachic requirement. The Isha Shenahaga Kain Varot Sales Batel Minhaga Rishait Lasot Ken. She can change her minhag. Umin Hadin Ein Atzricha Afilu Hatarat Nadarim Alkach. She doesn't really need Hatarat Nadarim. Umikol Malkam Tov Shita'aseh Hatara Al Minhagat. It's best for her to do if she can. Why might it not need Hatarat Nadarim? Because it's not really a chumrah, it's an Indian. The person, it's sorry, he does use the word chumrah, but he says chumrah ba'alma l'tosefet tahara, meaning it's not min hadin. It's not, you know, I don't use the eruv, or I don't open, you know, bottles on Shabbos. It's an Indian. There's no halachic requirement. One tefillah is sufficient, and therefore he says it's good, or like any minhag maybe to Hatarat Nadarim, but it's not a chumrah that one is taking or being made club.
So
okay, yeah.
Shiva, and I asked. The outside was yesterday. Oh, there you go. Okay, so there we go. All relevant then. And asked him about 3 hours and 6 hours meat and milk, and his 1-line response was, "Antitosh torati mecha," and I got my answer.
What did you do?
6.
6?
Yeah, I didn't want to go from 3 to 6.
Yeah,
I wanted to go from 6 to 3.
So there we go. This is very much Torah Imecha when it comes to these Inyanim. Until us Poms came along. Right.
You mean as opposed to that?
It's you guys really are mixing up milk and souffle. Okay.
That's the best, that's the smartest
better-
thing.
you better- We originally talked about the meter had 3 hours, basically.
The Tar Sofa and the Urbana Yorufa. Yes, but it's also an established minhag in Western Europe, and we won't discuss that now. Anyway, that brings us to the end of chapter 9, and now we're going to discuss Vestot. Vestot is the most or Visatot, as it should be in proper Hebrew, but Vestus, as it's known in the Yeshiva Shabbat. Well, just a flash, very well. I'm not sure if this qualifies as Siyum. It's a good question, but I Peter wants to bring his equipment in next week, so I'm not sure you're going to feel like eating anyway. So anyway, is that right, Peter? Next week, all right?
Okay, next week. No worries.
Okay, I'm not sure what we'll have to discuss beforehand. Okay, all right. We'll say
Yeah, I
that.
think
Anyway, so ironically, this seems to be that they've dedicated quite a short chapter to Vestot, but Vestot's perhaps the most complicated part of Hilchot Nida, especially for couples who are trying to learn and what they have to do. But Baruch Hashem, in the door of technology, there are some good, not ChatGPT, but there are some good apps out there which help with calculating dates and things. But the idea of Veset is that there are halachic requirements to, and here we just look at a brief summary of the main points, but as we know, there are halachic requirements to separate Samuch Levesta, when the woman is expecting her period and she's expecting to be Ra'adam. So based on typically her pattern, we work out what her Veset is, and the couple have to separate, certainly for marital relations, if not more, prior to the date where she's perhaps due to become Nida, to have her Veset. So when does this apply? So the Gemara in source 1 on page 351 here, in source 1, Gemara Masechet Nida Samach Gimel discusses this. You should separate Bnei Yisrael from their Tumah. Mekanam Rabbi Yoshia, Azhara Livnei Yisrael. Sheyifreshu Minashotehen Samuch Levestan. They should separate close to their Veset. B'chama Amarava Ona, and Ona. So we said that Ona means one period, either the daytime period or the nighttime period, the halachic 12-hour period. So there's a machloket as to whether Prisha Samuch Leveset, machloket in the Achronim they don't bring here, but whether it's Deraita or Drabanan. Because here it quotes a pasuk, and the question is if that's an asmachta or not. Right, so meaning right. So you're expecting her period, so then there's a requirement during that ona not to be intimate. So the question is when is that? When is samuch leveset? So it depends on the woman. It depends if she's got what's called a veset kavua. She has a fixed time, so she's established a fixed pattern 3 times, or a veset she'eno kavua. Most women have a veset she'eno kavua. Most women do not have a pattern where it's literally every 30 days or on the 4th of the Jewish month. So most women have a veset she'eno kavua, and therefore they have to be choshesh for different dates to separate, on which we will discuss. So source 2, Rashi says, can they have their own personal kaviyas? Can you explain?
It's not a day or a time,
So there's
interval, or there's something, some sensation.
So there's 2. There's something called a veset hazman, and there's something called a veset haguf. So veset hazman is based on a particular day, but veset haguf is a particular sensation. I know she plays soccer and then she gets a period like within an hour, then that's a veset haguf perhaps. The Gemara talks about veset, and the Shulchan Aruch passes veset lepihuk, lekihuk, she hiccups or something, and then that causes it. So that would be an example of veset haguf. So Rashi says in source 2, V'izartem et bnei Yisrael, the samichle, and immediately afterwards it's v'hadava b'nidatasa. So the idea is that the pasuk V'izartem et bnei Yisrael is referring to separation of nida. V'izartem milashon nazir. Lihinazer means to abstain or to separate. That's the idea of nazir. So I don't like in modern Hebrew that a nun is a nazira because it's lihinazer, like a nazir. So, but a minzar is a convert. But lihinazer means to abstain. Okay, what was that? All good? Nothing to share with the class? All right. Okay. So source 3, the Gemara then wants to discuss when is it that one is required to separate. So in source 3, Tani Chada, one brighter taught, Rabbi Yehuda Osra, Lifnei Vista, the material Achar Vesta. The Tani Idach, whereas the other version says, Rabbi Yehuda Osra, La'achar Vesta, a material Lifnei Vesta. When is it? Is it? Let's say she's expecting to get a period on this day. There's a contradiction between the 2 versions of Rabbi Yehuda. Is he allowing before the time of the Veset or after the time of Veset to be together? The Gemara there says in source 3, Lo Kasha, it's not a contradiction. Had Regila Michse Besof Lelia, One is where she's due to get a period at the end of the night, and one is where she's due to get it at the beginning of the day. Rava says halacha Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, the conclusion of the Gemara is that it's only the halachic ona which is due to get her period in. So if she was due to get, she got a period at night and 3 times with a gap of 30 days, let's say, then we'd anticipate that 30 days time at night she would get her period again. That's when she'd become nida, and therefore only in the nighttime hours they are not allowed to be intimate, but it wouldn't affect the daytime hours. There'd be no requirement to separate in the daytime, meaning specifically the ona in question, the daytime or the nighttime hours.
Not that you before that.
So that is the chumrah of the Orzara we'll get to in a minute. But not the ona before the ona she's expected to see, but only the ona itself. And typically when it comes to onot, we talk about the hallmark, the benchmarks being nates and shkia, sunrise and sunset, rather than alot tashachar and set of kochavim. So the Gemara source 4 in Nida says, "V'hatanya shuli wilan v'zatem bnei Yisrael tumatam mekan am Rabbi Yoshia as hara livnei Yisrael sheyifrashum shan samuch levistan." Surely the requirement is that you've got to separate close to the Veset. So ask Simon, that implies even the Veset before. So if she's due to get a period that night, then even the day hours before. V'chama, how much? Rava had said, ona. It's only the actual ona. So only the nighttime, but the daytime before would not be an issue. Or if she got a period previously in a fixed manner in the daytime, then the night before they'd be permitted to be together. Sorry? So I missed the next line. That was all part of the question. Rava says ona, it's ona. So the Gemara over the page says, my lav ona achriti does not imply even the other ona, meaning preceding ona. Lo, no, ota ona, that actual ona. You're right, I jumped the gun. I knew the maskan, so I forgot it continues over the page. But you're right. So ota ona, meaning only that ona itself, and that is the psak of the Shulchan Aruch. So if she saw her picture, she has a pattern she establishes every 30 days or every 29 days, whatever it is, and she always sees at night, then they only have to separate after the next 29 days at night, but not on the day before. Alternatively, if she saw for 3 months, every month after 29 days in the daytime, then the next month it will be 29 days later in the daytime, but the night before they would be allowed to be together, according to the letter of the law. And that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins at source 5. Only that's one ona. Imhu bayom, if it's the daytime, they got to separate during the daytime hours. We get her veset at night. Poresh kol halayla separates the whole night. Umutar bayom shelefanav ula acharav, but the day before and the daytime afterwards are allowed. Bein shekav'a veset b'shalosh shamim or b'pam achat. These halachot are the same as to whether the woman has a veset kavua or a veset she'eino kavua. So that is the letter of the law as paskined by the Shulchan Aruch. There is a chumrah of the Orzarua who perhaps had a different girsa to the Gemara, and says and understands that the maskana is that one should be more machmir, and if she's due to get a period in the daytime, they should separate the night before as well. Or if she's due to get a period in the nighttime, they should separate in the daytime before as well. In other words, he adds the previous ona as well, the previous half day as well. That's called the chumrah, the onat ha'orzarua. So anyone who, now with apps and things, so that you can, in the settings, you can pick, are you choshesh for the opinion of the orzarua, and like, the mikveh calendar apps, you can tick that box or not. So this is the Orzarua that we're discussing in source 6. Orzarua. Umori Avi Ezri Amarli. So the Avi Ezri said to me, Sheragilim lifrosh samuch levesta esrim va'arba sha'ot. So 24 hours, in other words, an entire day. She'im ragila lirot bayom, if she's due to get a period in the daytime, pashmena kola ana shelafana, and they should also separate the night before as well. The im ragila lirot balayla, and if she's expecting a period in the night, poresh mimena kola halayla v'hayom shelafaneh, then the night and the previous daytime as well. So you always add the previous ona as well. That is the psak of the Orzarua. However, as we saw, the Shulchan Aruch did not paskin that way, and Rav Yosef Karo in his Beit Yosef rejects that psak entirely. we saw that doesn't seem to be certainly our Girsa in the Gemara, which clearly said Ota Ona, that specific Ona, and there was no room to add another. So the Beit Yosef in source 7 there says, Besof Perika Ishashi Osat Tracheha, Ifsika Hilchata Ka Rabbi Yehuda de Savrachi. But the halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda. V'chach divrei kol poskim. That all the poskim say this way, that they've only got to separate that same few hours. Ula afuke mashinimsa katuv al shem ha'azarua, to exclude the opinion attributed to the azarua. Horesh adam ishtos samuch levesta isrim v'arba sha'ot, that one has to separate a whole day, meaning the previous night or the previous day as well. And let's just skip to the bold there in the end of source 7. Ve'ein tam v'shoresh ledvarim elu. There's no root or source for these words. Shaharei b'gemara mefurash kedivrei haposkim. The Gemara, at least our version of the Gemara, says say ota ona, specifically that time, and not to add any previous hours. It's an unnecessary chumrah, and therefore that's why the Shulchan Aruch paskins the way he does. Even though the Shulchan Aruch paskins the way he does, the Shach does bring the Or Zarua as a legitimate opinion, and therefore there are those certainly in the Ashkenazi community who might be choshesh for the psak of the Or Zarua, but it's not the Derech HaMelech, I would say. It's not the mainstream psak. But let's see how the Shach brings it. That was probably with Rav Shach, not the Shach. That's probably Rav Shach. Yes, I say a few hundred years difference. But okay, same, all kahanim, right? So let's see in source 8. The Tzarech Lomar, the Dat Ra'avan, the Vadayim Yesh La Veset Kavua Bayom, if she has a fixed Veset, Kogon Sheyesh La Veset La'olam B'Tchilato, or La'olam B'Msiyoto, or La'olam B'Sofod, she always sees in the daytime. A Veset always comes in the daytime. Einot Tzarech Lifrosh Ela Oto Hayom, only in the daytime you have to separate, but Lo Lefanav, and not the night before. But V'Hachi Eri B'Shasta Poskim, that's how our version of the Gemara and the Poskim rules. Aval Im Regida Lirot Bayom, Be'ela Shah Kavua. But if she usually does see in the time, but there's no fixed time in the day, but it's usually in the daytime. But it sort of moves around the day. Imken kol hayom vesta. The whole daytime is her veset. Udami ki ilu haya vesta kol hayom. Uvadai the isha shevesta kol hayom sricha lifrosh kol halayla shelafana. Uvhachim orzaru. So he limits the Ozarua to a case of woman that it could be any time in the daytime. So it's because it's so random and it's mufuzar, it's not musudar, but mufuzar, therefore he says to separate the night before. So are we choshish for the Ozarua? There are those poskim who are and those who are not. Majority of Achronim in the Ashkenazi world are not choshish for the Ozarua. The Aruch HaShulchan, notably among them, in source 9, says the Aruch HaShulchan, right, there are those, namely the Ozarua and the Shach, who say that the previous Veset as well, that the previous Onav as well, they should separate. But that opinion has been rejected. And therefore, one does not have to be choshesh for the Ozarua. They quote here of Hershel Shechter, who also quotes the Chazon Ish, who also said there's no requirement to be choshesh for the Ozarua, and it's enough to separate on the actual Onah. And that's really sort of mainstream Ashkenazic psak. Again, they quote Rav Vazna, the Shevet Halevi, who says that one should be machmir for the Ozarua in source 11, but he accepts that it's a chumrah. So if we just skip to the bold there in source 11, says Rav Vazna, Raku inyan shel chumrah nosefet is an additional stringency. Shekiblu al atzmam gadolei harishonim, v'lo nizkar b'shulchan aruch v'ramah, ach kivan she'ein ostira ein tam she'olif sotken. So even though the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah don't paskin that way, he's classic Rav Vazna. No, if it's not a direct contradiction, so why not be machmir? It's a different way of looking at psak. One would argue that for him to say Einos Ira is maybe not so accurate, because we saw that the Bet Yosef vehemently opposed the psak. He says it's against our Gemara, and therefore did not bring it in his Shulchan Aruch. Meaning the fact that it's not a steer to the Shulchan Aruch is true, but in his larger work, the Beit Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Kara spoke out against the chumrah of the Ozarua, but that's nonetheless what he paskins. They quote Rav Moshe Feinstein also as saying it's good to be machmir, but as I said, that's not the derech hamelech. If you look at source 12, v'ra'oi lehachmir gam ken chumrot ha'ur zarua hamuva b'shach lifrosh ona achat smucha le'ona taveset im lo b'mkom tzorech. So he says it's ra'oi to be machmir, but Yesh v'yesh. There are different opinions as to whether to take that on or not. Interestingly, that they bring Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, the Darkei Tahara, says that it's good for Sfardim also to be machmir for the Ozarua, but strictly speaking, it is not required. So even with the Sephardic world, there's a machloket as to whether to take on the chumrah of the Ozarua. So Rav Mordechai Eliyahu says yes in source 13, and he brings at the end. I'll just skip to the last. We won't read it inside, but he essentially says it there in source 13 to be machmir. We just due to time, we won't read it inside. But then they quote Rav David Yosef, one of Rav Avadia's sons, in the Tahara, who says that Sfardim do not have to be choshesh for the Ozarua either. So again, there's a machloket in this regard. If we see in source 14, if we want to see Rav David Yosef, he says, "Haprisha va'onat haveset hi le'olam ona shleima." It's a one full ona. Dahainu yom or laila, either the daytime hours or the nighttime hours. Beimi mea kait, so beimi mea choref, and this is an important point. It's halachic hours. There are many discrepancies. There are many discrepancies between Rav Mordechai Eliyahu and Rav Avadia Yosef when it comes to Sephardic Pshat. Rav David, yes, quoting his father, but he also says that. But there are many differences between the within the Sephardic world. There are Sephardim who follow Rav Mordechai Eliyahu and those who follow Rav Avadia Yosef and his derech. So this is going in the derech of Rav Avadia. So another example is before doing a hefsek tahara, Ashkenazim we wait 5 days minimum, whereas Sephardim women can wait 4 days if they're able to form a hefsek tahara. According to Rav Avadia, whereas Rav Mordechai Eliyahu brought the standard to Sephardim and said they also have to wait 5 days. So even within the Sephardic world, there are Sephardim who follow Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, there are Sephardim that follow Rav Avadia. So this is another example of different drachim within the world of Edot HaMizrach. And he says there in source 14.
Here it says,
yes.
Yes, is he implying so the hafrasha? So if a period hasn't started during the honor, then so only that honor is asur, and then after the honor, the next one is okay again.
But if we're dealing with a woman as a vesek kavua, possibly. It gets a bit more difficult when it's a vesek she'ena kavua. Halachically, it's a period of days, what's called yemei muvocha, days of uncertainty. And then there's a machloket between the Noda Yehuda and others as to whether they can be intimate during those days or not. So certainly if she's a vesek kavua,
only about 25% of women have a cycle variation of less than 1.5 days.
There you go.
So 75% of women have a cycle variation greater than 1.5.
As I said, if time allows, we'll see it today, if not next week. But when it comes to the pill, so that simplifies everything, because the consensus of poskim is woman on the pill has a halachic status of mesuleket damim. So she's not choshesh for anything, like when she's pregnant, so or post-menopause. So halachically, when she's on the pill, she's mesuleket damim, and then when after sort of 2 days after she takes her last pill, then we're choshesh again. So that just makes life much more simple. But nonetheless,
that's only if you're allowed to be on the pill.
No, I'm saying a woman who's on the pill. So as long as she's taking the pill, she's got halachic status of mesuleket damim, as if she's a woman who doesn't get a period, and therefore you don't have to be choshesh for any dates until she takes her final pill, and then either 36 or 48 hours afterwards, then they separate, depending who you ask. Okay, so we said this is either way. As we go back to sort of what we're discussing, when she's expecting a period, there's a requirement to separate. What does to separate mean? Does it mean only bia, only marital relations, or does it mean any form of kirva, any form of intimacy, of closeness? So over the page, Shulchan Aruch source 15, Yodea Kuf Pei Daled says, B'shat vesta tzarich lifrosh memena ona achat. They've got to separate for one ona. V'lo misha'ar kreivot ela mitashmish bilvad. So only from marital relations, but not from hugging or kissing or anything like that. Right, exactly. The Shach says it seems to imply that way, but he then brings the position of the Bach, who says it's good to be machmir, one who does tavo alav bracha. So the Shach in source 16 says, "V'lo misha'ar kreivot mashma afilu chibuk v'nifshuk shari." So even during the ona, when she's expecting a period, according to the Shulchan Aruch, you can still have chibuk v'nifshuk, hugging and kissing. Kamosha pasak beit Yosef b'mashmat poskim. Udoloko trumat hadeshen, unlike the trumat hadeshen, the chen yeradat harab b'sif yud, v'chein pasak habeis chadash. That's also the pasak of the Bach. Ela shemasayem, but the Bach concludes mihu nir'eh deha machmir be'ele tavo alav bracha. So the Bach brings the chumrah. It's good to be machmir, and one gets a bracha, one's machmir to separate for chibuk and nishuk as well during the Veset. What the Bach said was merely tavo alav bracha. His son-in-law, the Taz, said one really should separate even from chibuk and nishuk, even from hugging and kissing, the ikar hadin, and he quotes that b'shem harosh. So the Bach's son-in-law, the Taz, in source 17 says, "V'lo mishad krevot the Bet Yosef katav da'afilu chibuk v'nishuk mutar." Right, the Shulchan Aruch allows even hugging and kissing, v'lo chashinan lebir. And we're not concerned that by hugging and kissing that might lead to them having marital relations. Kivan shabir isud rabbanan, v'tzoloko trumat hadeshin shekatav isud b'chibuk v'nishuk, unlike the trumat hadeshin who doesn't even allow hugging and kissing. V'chatav mori chamizal, but my father-in-law, the Bach, wrote, "Hamachmir bezeh tavo alav bracha." One who's machmir gets bracha. V'linere, but I think, says the Taz, she'asar min hadin l'dat harosh. Even according to the letter of the law, according to the Rosh, it's not allowed. Even to hug and kiss during when she's expecting her Veset. Ura'ayam is Siman Shimpei Gimel, because we see from Shimpei Gimel, Katav Harosh in Avelut. When it comes to Avelut, what did the Rosh write? Sheyesh lahachmir b'chibuk v'nishuk, shehu me'vili de cheshek, v'hu hadin nami hacha. So the Rosh, he learns out the Rosh in Hilchos Avel says that during the Shiva they shouldn't have chibuk and nishuk, and therefore he would say the same thing should apply here as well. And therefore, it's not just a chumrah. He says it's mikar hadin according to the Rosh.
But he says the chibuk is because it might lead to something.
Yes. Yes.
That's not the only reason.
That's the reason that the post.
There's no context, so.
We're not talking about which is there, we're talking about.
Okay. So the question is, what about the harchakot? So according to Shulchan Aruch, it's only intimacy during this period of Veset, which is forbidden, whereas according to only marital relations, where according to the Bach and certainly the Taz, it's even hugging and kissing. They bring here the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Balatanya, source 18, who says that he brings both. He brings everything we've just seen, and then he adds the requirement to separate beds as well in source 18. So we'll just look at the bold there because he repeats everything we've just seen. But if you look at the bold in source 18, they shouldn't be in the same bed. So they should be separating the beds during the Onat Haveset. So if she's expecting a period at night, then they should separate the beds according to Shulchan Aruch Harav. Okay. So halacha lemaisa, we see in Machloket here in the Achronim, the Shulchan Aruch versus the Nosakalim. They quote here again the Darkei Tahara, who says that strictly speaking it's allowed, and again one who thinks that it might should be machmir, and so that doesn't lead to tashmish hamita, so it doesn't lead to marital relations, then should perhaps separate from this as well. So he says there in the Darkei Tahara in source 19. But Yamim Eile, during these days, she's not yet received her, she's not yet got her period. There's a chance it's going to come. Asurim hem rak b'tashmish hamita. They're only forbidden to have relations. They're allowed to hug and kiss. V'yesh osrim, are those that forbid this. Lahalacha, practically speaking, noagim lahachi chibuk v'nishuk. The consensus is to allow hugging and kissing. However, im adam makir tatzmo, if a person knows about themselves, v'yodea shedavar ze alul lahaviola tashmish hamita or lisurim acherim, then yirchak mizeh. Then he should distance himself from such a thing. Again, they quote here the Badei Shulchan, Rafael Cohen, who says that those who are machmir taval and bracha. So again, we've just seen in the contemporary poskim a repeat of what we saw in the earlier Nosei Kelim or Shulchan Aruch, but that you get the idea from him. Okay. Yes.
You don't have to do it, but if you do, it's praiseworthy. It's praiseworthy, or you're going to get more merit for it. So, like, who doesn't want that? You know what I mean? It's like
people who want shalom bias, right?
It's not praiseworthy. Like, why not just say it's permitted or it's okay?
Because it is okay, but there is clearly a day and opinion in the Achronim. So Tavalav Bracha, Tavalav Bracha means if somebody wants to, then it's good that they're being machmir for that, but it's not a requirement according to the letter of the law. It's a question of policy. When you have, I don't lahavdil in the medical field, where you have a consensus of 99% of of medical experts say one thing, or one person says this, so then it's different.
That's different. Just saying the many West say you don't do it, you're going to be better than everyone else. That's what it's saying. It's saying you're actually better.
No, it's not. It's not because because the Bach. Right.
It says here, you will be blessed. It is praiseworthy. I.e., if you don't do it, you won't be blessed, and it's not praiseworthy.
I'll go for them.
Okay.
I mean, their recommendations.
So let's I hear what you're saying. I want to get through the next bit because the next bit I'm cognizant of the time, and with to Veset Kavur versus Veset She'eno Kavur. So get really complicated. So the Darkei Tahara here brings all different types of a Veset Kavur, a fixed Veset. So he brings a whole list here, but we're just going to discuss the main ones. As we said, it splits into two categories. It's called Veset Hazman and Veset Haguf. Veset Hazman means she gets a period at a fixed time. Veset Haguf means that she gets a period at a fixed response to a fixed action. I know she hiccups or whatever, and then that causes her Veset. So the most common ones, we'll just look at the first two for now, source 21. You see where it says number 1 in source 21, number 1, what that's called the Veset Haflaga, the Veset of gaps between the previous two periods, right? Hainu Veset Shebo Yesh Merchak Yamim Kavua Bein Re'iyah LeRe'iyah. There's a fixed amount of days between each period. So that's what's called a Veset Haflaga. And number 2, Veset HaChodesh. Veset HaChodesh means it's the same date of the Hebrew calendar. So Re'iyah HaChozeret V'nishnet V'yom Mesuyam V'kavua B'chodesh. So what were you going to say?
There are 29 days.
So that shows you that it's not a bodily function. It's like a halachic Veset Kavua, right? So those are the two most famous ones. He brings here Veset HaShavua every week, say they were all the same time of the week, same day of the week. Dilug Chodesh, that it goes up basically, every 33 days or whatever it is. It skips and it gets more over time. We won't read the different ones, but if we skip to Veset Haguf, so he discusses there that again it's the same idea that a Veset Haguf can come sometimes with a Veset Hazman, and sometimes totally unrelated to Veset Hazman. So it might be a fixed action at a fixed time. But the most important ones which we have to discuss are Veset Haflaga and Veset HaChodesh. Veset Haflaga is the same gap. So she gets a period every 30 days. So for 4 periods, so 3 ranges basically, it's always 30 days. That gives it a Veset Kavua. Or if she sees on the 4th of the Hebrew month, 3 months in a row, then she has a fixed Veset HaChodesh. So what about a woman who's got a Veset She'eno Kavua? That means that she doesn't have any fixed pattern such as this. What does she have to do? So the Shulchan Aruch paskins, she's got to separate from her husband on 3 dates. What are those 3 dates? The Veset HaChodesh, the same date, calendar date the next month. Veset Haflaga, the same number of days as between now and her last period. She's got to then separate on that date. And what's called the Ona Beinonit, which is the average amount of time. Machloket, whether that's 30 or 31 days. But those are the 3 dates she has to separate. Now, it's important to note that often these days overlap. So the Ona Beinonit, according to most poskim, is the 30th day from her period. So that's 29 days later. So if the month she's in is got 29 days, then the Ona Beinonit will be the same day as the Veset HaChodesh in the following month. So a woman who doesn't have a Veset Kavua is supposed to separate from her husband on these 3 dates, but often these dates might overlap. So we see in source 22, says the Shulchan Aruch, Kol isha she'ein la Veset Kavua, she's not got a fixed Veset, chosheshet leyom lamud l'riyata, she separates on day 30 from her period, shehu ona beinonit listam nashim, which is the average amount of time. Interesting that, Peter is shaking his head. Chazal thought it was the 30th day.
Probably 29 would be. 29 is probably slightly more accurate, but it's marginal.
So probably 29, he said. Okay, so that's good because how do we calculate these 30 days? So there's a machloket, a poskin. So the Shulchan Aruch says, and what the consensus is that 30 days, including the day that she got her period. So basically, it's 29.
I'm saying 29. Like day 1 is the day you have your period.
Oh, so you're saying it's more like 28. Okay.
Yeah, so
this is what Chazal did. This is how they fixed it.
Again.
Sorry, Nishtan. Right, there you go. So Nishtana Hateva, nachon. Okay. So therefore, if she has her period on Monday, then Ona Beinonit would be in 4 weeks' time on the Tuesday. So it's 29 days later, and that's what the Darkei Tahara says here inside in source 23. Ona Beinonit hi tarich memutza l'rov nashim, the average date of most women. V'u yom hashloshim l'tchilat riyata, day 30 from the start of her period. Hainu isha she'etchila le'rot b'yom rishon b'shavua, if she got a period on Sunday. Shricha lachshosh v'lifrash mebala b'yom sheni. So she got a period on Sunday, then in 4 weeks' time on the Monday. Okay. The Seder Gamur. Okay, the Chavas Das quotes though it's 31st day. But we're typically not machmir that way. If we see in source 24, Yesh Omrim, Sha'ona Beinonit, who are Yom HaShloshim ve'echad, Yitchila Riata, ve'ein machmirim k'motam. So those are Choshesh for the Chavat Da, but typically we're not Choshesh for that. So one date, a woman with not got a fixed Veset would have to separate 29 days later, i.e. the 30th day period, the Ona Beinonit, also the Veset HaChodesh. So the same date the next month as well. That's called the Veset HaChodesh, and also the Veset HaFlaga. So if it's been 29 days since the last period, then 29 days from now onwards.
So what's the
3 days.
3 dates. 3 dates, but often those dates overlap. Ona Beinonit, so the 30th day. Veset HaChodesh, so the same day. Today's Daled, then Daled the next month, and the Veset HaFlaga, the gap, the same gap between her last 2 periods, between this one and the previous one, so then 2 again. So those are the 3 dates that we're choshesh for if a woman does not have a Veset Kavua.
And the Darkei Tahara
Yes.
is a sefer that is popularly used amongst.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean,
He brings psak of both, but
I mean, it's authoritative amongst Ashkenazim as well.
yes.
So but it's written by a Sephardi for Sephardim. Or we use
He quotes both. He does quote both opinions.
So in terms of how we relate to his Piskei Halacha, I mean, what are we doing?
We certainly do take them into account.
So we use
We do. The problem is in the Sephardi world, because the Sephardi world is very split on different Masorot. So the world of Eidotam Mizrach, I should say, you've got, I said, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, you've got Rav Ovadia, and Rav Ovadia is very makel when it comes to a lot of things in Hilchot Nida, in contrast to someone like Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, as we've seen throughout. Not just in terms of days, but in terms of harchakot, in terms of a lot of things. Because Maran, he's got a pasuk like Maran, Bet Yosef, and it doesn't matter if there are other people Sephardim from other parts of the world. That's authority. Rambam, that's what she's. We'll just. Sorry, yeah, but the Rambam has his own chumrah. So, okay. So, what is the Yom HaChodesh? We only got a couple of minutes left. So, what is the Yom HaChodesh? So, as you said, the same date. Okay. So, how do we establish that? So, she sees the same date three months in a row. Source 25. Ra'ata gimul pe'amim be'echad b'Nisan uve'echad be'Iyar uve'echad b'Sivan. It's always on the first of the month. Or be'hei Nisan, hei Iyar, hei Sivan. Kav'ala veset. Then she becomes a veset kavua, and then the next month she'd only have to be choshesh on that date. Right? Uve'echad b'chodesh or behebo. Afal pisha echad male ve'echad chaser. So as you pointed out, even though they've got some 29, some are 30, it does not matter. So a woman who has a veset kavua would only have to be choshesh for one date the next month, but a woman who has a veset she'eno kavua, a non-fixed cycle, then she'd be choshesh for three dates. So the Ona Beinonit 30 days, the 30th day, the same date, and then the same haflaga, which is in source 26. The im yeshla veset kavua is manyadua. If she has a fixed interval, haflaga interval, mikaf lakaf every 20 days, or mikaf hey lakaf every 25 days, chosheshet lezman hayadua. Then she honestly 25 days later is all she'd have to do. Okay. Beseder Gamur, and the Shulchan Aruch there in source 27 repeats these three dates, which we don't have to read inside. Okay. Okay. Just to end off, there's something called Yemei Mevocha. So she's got a woman who has a Veset She'ena Kavua, then has 3 dates. Essentially, sometimes it's 2, depending on but what happens on the in-between days? Meaning she's going to get a period on Monday, or on the Wednesday, or on the Thursday. So then can they be intimate on the Tuesday? So there's a big machloket. It depends how you understand the Ramah in source 28. The Ramah says, V'isha shemishanet vesta. If she doesn't have an exact period, but it moves. Lahakdim bet or gimel yamim. So it's roughly within 2 or 3 days of a range every month. Or la'achak shemagias man vista, or later than the time of her veset. tzarich lifrosh mimena bet or gimel yamim kodem or acharav. So she's got to separate for the all 2 or all 3 days. So the Gra and the Shach understand, and many of the Nosei Kelim, that the Ramah there is talking about a case, a woman who's got a Vesek Kavua, she sees every 30 days, but as a one-off, she suddenly saw 1 month after 28 days. That's when she's got to separate on the 28th day the following month and the 30th day. So she keeps her regular Vesek and she's concerned for the exception as well. The Noda B'Yehuda, however, Rabbi Cheskel Landau understood differently. He understood that the Ramah was talking about that any woman who doesn't have a Vesek Kavua should always be choshesh for the range. And therefore, on the in-between days, they should not be intimate together. That is the chumrah of the Noda B'Yehuda, and it's called in halacha the Yemei Mevocha, the days of uncertainty, meaning the range. So the Mari Cohen here brings that. We'll just read the bold at the end of source 29. But Nechlaku Aposkim, the Poskim disagree. Ha'im chosheshet lekol hayamim behem regila lirot. Are we concerned for the range of all these in-between days? So it's a machloket haposkim. There are those that are choshesh for all the days, and he brings that there. Halacha lemaisa, what do we do? So that yesh v'yesh, but those who are makel. So the at least I'm sorry I received from the Gush is that one can be makel on the in-between days, but the woman should do a badika beforehand if they're being intimate on the in-between days, meaning between the Ona Beinonit and the Veset HaChodesh, if there's or Veset HaFlaga, there's room to be makel, but to do a badika in between. And we'll stop things there, and we will continue here next week. Bezrat Hashem. Yishar Koch Hachem.